So I will go ahead and kick things off. Welcome everybody. Happy Women's History Month and happy day before International Women's Day. That's why we are here tonight in honor of International Women's Day. I'm Nicole Grossberg from New York Sun Works, and I'll be hosting and moderating your event tonight. So tonight's topic is how young women can launch a career in science and STEM. And we're really lucky to hear from some distinguished panelists. But before we jump in, I want to announce that this event is hosted in partnership with one of our greatest partners at New York Sun Works, the New York Power Authority, or NYPA. So I'm going to pass it along for a few quick words from Lisa Payne Winesley, who's NYPA's Vice President of Environmental Justice and Sustainability. So Lisa, if you want to come back on and take it away.
Yes, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us tonight in celebration of Women's History Month and International Women's Day. You know, this is so important for us to be able to share our stories and speak with each other and actually really expose you, the students and your families, to all of the STEM careers that are out there, all of the opportunities that exist. The New York Power Authority is the largest state-owned utility in the United States. We have many employees, including my sister, my NYPA sister, April Contreras, who you'll hear from tonight, as well as two other people who will share their stories with you. It is very important that we come together in these type of venues. This intersection of women joining a once male-dominated industry is symbolic of the force that women have in our lives and the power that women have. So I hope that the stories that you hear and the discussion that you hear tonight will inspire you, your families, and your peers to continue the conversation. And let's continue to support each other and empower women all across the United States, but most importantly, inspire young women is most important. So I'm going to turn it back over to Nicole. Enjoy tonight's event, and we hope to have, this will be the first of many, many more that we will have.
Well said. Thank you, Lisa. So I just want to announce quickly our panelists for tonight that you will hear from in a couple of minutes. So we have Becky Higgins from New York Sun Works. She's on the education team. We have Eva Das, an alumni student from Edward Murrow High School, who went through the entire New York Sun Works program throughout her high school career. And we have April Contreras, who is a key accounts manager at NYPA. So you'll hear from all of them in a couple of minutes. And then I also wanted to mention that I'm joined by Justin Rose and Matt Caruso at NYPA. If you have any questions for them throughout the event, feel free to find them in the chat box. Okay, so just to start things off, we just want to have a little bit of background on everybody who is here watching tonight. So I'm just going to launch a quick poll. And if you could just let us know who you are, if you're a student, a teacher, or a staff member, a working professional, or you're a parent of a student. So it looks like we have 17% students, 8% teachers, staff. Oh, still going. I'm going to give it another minute. So 11% students, 17% teacher, staff member. Most of us are working professionals, so 72%, and we don't have any parents of students. So that's good to know. Thank you all for doing that. So just share results quickly. Okay, great. Thank you all for participating. And now, before we get started, just a quick icebreaker. Everyone already pretty much told us where they're tuning in from, but if quickly everybody could just put in the chat box, what brought you here tonight on International Women's Day? What attracted you to this event? What does International Women's Day mean to you? Let's just get some quick chatter going on before we officially start with our panelists. And just make sure you click in the chat box where you write type message here above that, just click to everyone instead of hosts and panelists so everybody could see your messages. All right, Monica says, raising up excellent work of women in science. Love that. Leah and Mabel Scott said that science is their favorite subject in school. We love to hear that. That's great. Okay, we'll keep those answers coming. But without further ado, I would love to get our panel started. We're going to spend the next 30 to 35, maybe 40 minutes with our panelists, and then we will go ahead and take audience questions for the last 10 to 15 minutes of the hour. So please use the Q&A function to submit your questions. It's on the bottom of your screen. If you do have just general comments or want to talk about things that are happening in the chat throughout the evening, please feel free to use that. We encourage natural conversation and foster those organic discussions. So definitely feel free to use that. Okay, so without further ado, I would love to invite Becky, Eva, and April to come back online and turn their cameras on. Okay, welcome ladies, good to see you. Happy Monday and happy almost International Women's Day. I just love to get started and hear a little bit about all of you. If you could just introduce yourselves to our attendees. So Becky, you want to kick things off?
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much for having me. This is a really big honor to be here. So just a little bit of background about myself. My name is Becky Higgins. I went to Cornell University undergrad and I studied environmental science and marine science and also education. So I've always been extremely passionate about science education. I then taught actually in an urban setting for 4 years in Connecticut and got my master's in education. And I now work for New York Sun Works on the education team, which has been really exciting to be able to do sustainability science and education and pair those two loves of mine together. So really happy to be here.
Great, so I'll go ahead and share my screen if you want to give a little bit of background about New York Sun Works.
Awesome. Okay, thanks so much, Nicole. So yeah, just a little bit of background about New York Sun Works, which is an organization that myself and Nicole work with, as well as some other people on this call. We are a nonprofit organization that is extremely passionate about bringing hydroponic farms into New York City public schools. So we are really excited about engaging students in science in order to train students to build a more sustainable future. So whether or not students are actually going to be going into sustainable fields, we really want students to have the opportunity for hands-on science learning that really gets them involved, thinking about the future of farming and the future of our world in terms of sustainability. So we are building these hydroponic classrooms, but we are also invested in making sure students have the opportunity to have sustainability science hands-on investigation. So students are learning about climate change, they're learning about how to create positive change within their communities and globally, and they have opportunities for literally doing hands-on work with hydroponic farming, which, by the way, if you don't know what that is, when we're using hydroponics, we are using no soil at all in our farming. We're using very little water. So this is the potential future of urban farming. So this is a solution that can work with a lot of different schools. It's scalable. We have farms, we have hydroponic farms that are in greenhouse classrooms as well as greenhouses. And yeah, we're really excited to continue to be training students in thinking about how they can have future careers in STEM and science and give hands-on opportunities for them to grow and participate with each other. Just to see a little bit of what kind of some of the insides of our classrooms look like, we have a greenhouse here and some examples of our hydroponic systems in our greenhouse classrooms. This is just an example of some of the classrooms that we have. Something that I do on the education team is I help to train teachers in thinking about how they're going to be bringing the sustainability science curriculum to their students. So when we work with schools, we work with teachers, we train teachers thinking about how they can create really innovative and fun experiences for students to be working with the hydroponic systems and to be making their own investigations in their classrooms. We actually have an annual youth conference coming up this spring, Tuesday, May 24th, if anyone wants to join. And their students will be showcasing their investigations that they've run in their own science classroom. So our curriculum is not just about students having these hands-on experiences, but also discovering their own investigations, their own curiosities, and being able to implement that by themselves, which is really cool to see. We also have professional development for teachers, which is a way to have teachers collaborating with one another and have a huge network of partner teachers across all 5 boroughs. If I didn't say that already, we're in all 5 boroughs. We're in almost 200 schools and expanding rapidly. And we also have a huge community engagement component, which maybe Nicole, you can speak to since that's your specialty as well.
Yep, just finding my mute button. Yeah, so the last piece of the puzzle really is getting out the amazing harvest that we have from the classroom, from all the growing that the students have been doing. They actually get to grow that produce and then harvest it and bring it into the community. So whether they bring it home to their families and they get to cook and learn about nutrition with their families, or we get to bring it to a local food pantry or a local community fridge. But really it all comes full circle where that harvested produce gets to go back home or out into the community. Great, thank you, Becky, for that. And I'd love to pass it over to April to introduce herself and NYPA.
Hi, Nicole, thank you. Thank you for having me tonight. I'm really excited to be here. You can pull up the slide, please.
Yeah.
So yeah, just a little bit about myself. I was born and raised in the Bronx. I attended St. Raymond's Elementary School in the Soundview, Casa Hill area, and then Aquinas High School in Fordham Road. I attended Buffalo State College, where I received my bachelor's in electrical engineering technologies. I also recently completed a master's in received my MBA from the University of Buffalo, thanks to NYPA's assistance with their tuition reimbursement program. I started at NYPA as a project engineer working in their clean energy solutions department. I'm currently a key account manager working on business development and with our commercial industrial customers. So I always like to talk about achievements, but I think when talking to young people, it's also important to talk about obstacles that we face. So I also want to talk about some obstacles that I faced. It's not on the slide, but I just like to go over it. So I was kicked out of my high school my junior year, going into my senior year. I actually decided not to attend college after my FAFSA was rejected because of my parents' tax issues. When I finally did decide to go to college and I went to Buffalo State after about 3 semesters, I dropped out because I didn't really have direction and I had some attitude issues. You know, you can take the girl out the Bronx, but you can't take the Bronx out the girl. So, you know, I had to take some time and go find myself. And I ended up eventually coming back to Buff State and graduating. It took me about 7 years total to receive my degree on and off. I had to take a C++ coding 3 times before I passed it with a D. And I had to go to tutoring for calculus after every class just to get a C+. So my message, anytime I'm talking to you know, anyone about engineering, is just really one about believing yourself and in yourself and pushing and striving for what you want in life and what you know that you're capable of. When I mentioned to my college friends that I was considering switching majors to engineering, they laughed at me and told me that it was impossible. And so, you know, believing in yourself and showing up is really important. So I just like to start with that. Next slide. So talking a little bit more about the New York Power Authority. So this is clearly a map of New York State, and it shows where we have our energy generating facilities. We have 16 of them across the state. The oldest and largest being the Niagara Power Project in Niagara Falls, New York. It's a hydroelectric power plant. The lines across the state or across the map are actually our transmission lines. We have about 1,400 miles of transmission to move that energy that we generate across the state to all across the state, mostly, you know, we created in more rural areas and then pushed it to more populated areas. So we have a large asset across the state, and because of that, we need a lot of people. So we we employ about over 2,000 people in a variety of different fields. And like I said, I started in project engineering. I currently am working in business development and key account management. There's all different kind of opportunities. We love to hire engineers, mechanical, environmental, chemical, but we also have a need for accounting and finance, HR, DEI, civil rights and inclusion. So we're, a large employer throughout the state. So, again, excited to be here. Thank you for having me. Thank you to New York Sun Works. Thank you to NYPA.
Awesome. Thank you so much, April. And that was super inspiring and hopefully just a taste of all the great conversation we'll have tonight. So thank you for sharing that in your introduction. Okay, Eva, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and then we'll ask some more questions.
Yes. Hi, thank you so much for having me. My name is Eva Das, and I am currently a freshman at Barnard College of Columbia University. I'm planning on studying computer science and environmental science. I'm actually involved with New York Sun Works because my high school actually went through the greenhouse project that they implemented in my school. Basically, they implemented a greenhouse in my high school, which kind of fostered the sustainable sciences in our school community. So I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. Thank you, Eva. So Eva's our perfect successful success story of somebody who went through the New York Sun Works program and is actually pursuing it in college. So we're so excited to have you here. So the first thing I wanted to ask all of you, or Becky, April, Eva, any of you who want to respond to this, is just when exactly did you discover your love of science? Like, what exactly made you interested in pursuing this type of career? April, you touched a little bit about that in your introduction, but was there kind of like a light bulb moment for you, Becky or Eva, or was it something that just kind of happened over time?
I can jump in. So one of the things that made me, I've loved the ocean and science since I was really little, but something that made me really think about pursuing a career in science was volunteering at the New England Aquarium. So I actually started volunteering there technically before you were supposed to, but I asked and I kind of begged with them to let me in. And that really started my love of science. I was volunteering there every Saturday from when I was 12 to all the way up to college, and even some summers in college. And I had always loved animals. I'd always loved the ocean, but it was this opportunity for me to teach people about it that was extremely exciting for me. So that was something that really started off making me not just interested in just animals or just the ocean, but teaching people about science. And that's something that stayed in my career, stayed in when I studied science in college and education in college, and in my career now. And something else that really helped me kind of pursue my love of science was having really incredible women in science to look up to. And that made a huge difference for me. For example, I had a teacher in high school, Dr. Baum, who was just so extremely passionate about what she was doing. She was a teacher, but she'd also done cancer research in the past. And the way that she taught our class, she was just so incredibly passionate and willing to share her experiences with us and answer any questions that we had, meet with us after school, and really give us ideas for potential opportunities in the future, whether that was internships or even people that she could connect us with. So I know we're going to be talking about this later on in some of the questions perhaps, but something that really helped mold my love of science was having other women in science that were able to open up my mind to different possibilities of careers in science and futures there. So something that really made me pursue that was having women that I was, inspired by push me to go after that internship, or, I should study marine science in college, all of that stuff. So.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's so good to hear. So basically it's, the three of you, and I'm sure a lot of women who are joining us tonight, you're probably a role model to plenty of young women and you don't even realize it. So that's such a beautiful thing to hear. Eva, what about you?
I think similar to Becky, having that role model aspect, I think for me, it was like my mom, in elementary school, my school would host these little science events, and my mom would always take me to these science events, and we would kind of just bond over our genuine fascination and our genuine curiosity for like the experiments that were being, done in these events. And I think what really solidified my love for science was also in high school because I was a part of my high school's research program where we explored like all the sciences. And I'm really interested in sustainability and tech, and I think much of that interest came from the greenhouse that was implemented in my high school through New York Sun Works. I spent a lot of my time volunteering in the greenhouse, and I think it further explored. I was able to further explore the engineering aspect and the certain technology that was implemented, and how science can kind of elevate into like the real world and it can apply to the real world. So I'm really glad that New York Sunworks kind of implements these greenhouses into elementary schools, because if I had a greenhouse in my elementary school, that would have been like amazing.
Your love of science would have started a lot earlier, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Amazing.
So for myself, engineering definitely wasn't something that was on my forefront of my mind. I have been in a lot of math and science like summer programs in school, just based off of like standardized testing and doing well on those tests. And I actually majored in wildlife biology when I started in college, and not no diss on the sciences, but I didn't really enjoy it. There was like a memorization kind of vibe to it that I just didn't really enjoy. And when I came back to finish my degree, I was looking to be in one of the top professions, doctor, lawyer, engineer, and engineering's the only one you don't need a postgraduate degree for. And in taking my first engineering course, electrical engineering course, and learning about magnetic fields and electric motors and things that I had never heard of before, learned before, it really sparked my creativity, and I really started eating it up. So if anyone's looking for a challenge or just to continue to learn new information, I think engineering is definitely the field for you. So
awesome, thank you. And today, obviously, we're celebrating International Women's Day, which falls on tomorrow, Tuesday. So I'm just wondering if each of you could share a couple of sentences on what this day means to you and why it's special to you.
Yeah, I could start us off. I believe, us as women, we already face much prejudice in society, and even more being in the STEM field, since much of the STEM field is very much dominated by men, and it can cause some feelings of, discomfort, inadequacy. However, I think International Women's Day kind of reminds us that we deserve to be treated equally and respected. And it really reminds us how far we came in society, and kind of celebrates our accomplishments, because we are pretty amazing.
Wow, well said. Yes.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Eva said. It's definitely an opportunity to reflect on how far we come, and also to be appreciative for what we have here in the U.S. that women across the world don't have the same privileges that we have. So it's so much of an opportunity to appreciate the women in our lives, our in our careers, and also to be grateful for what's possible for us to achieve here.
Yeah, and if anybody who's attending wants to share in the chat what this day means to them as well, we'd love to hear from you. Becky, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, definitely on a personal note, I think it's incredible it's really important to celebrate the women around you. I have a couple of women that are super important in my life who are actually here on this call with us. So from a personal standpoint, it's really important that we've had these amazing role models to look up to, whether it's in your family or outside of your family. But I think if we also think about International Women's Day in the context of science and STEM, like we're talking about on this call, I think we would not be where we are today without the incredible discoveries of women in science. Women like Katherine Johnson, who helped navigate us to the moon. Women like Rosalind Franklin, who helped discover the DNA double helix. And then we have incredible scientists of today, like Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson, who's a marine biologist of our generation. There's just been so many incredible women in science that have accomplished amazing things that push our world forward in science, STEM, thinking about climate change, all of those things. What's to say who's going to discover what next? It's probably going to be a woman. So it's really critical that we continue to empower young women and give them opportunities to pursue science and see role models as women in science as well, especially at a young age, like Eva talked about. Because if any of these discoveries are going to happen in the future that we can't even yet imagine, we need to make sure that we have women in places of power, in positions of power, inspiring younger people so that they can see themselves in those positions as well someday.
Oh my gosh, you're all incredible. That was so well said, and I feel so inspired and motivated by that. So on that note, Eva, I want to take it back to you and actually ask, so I know most people on this call are actually working professionals already, but I'm sure you have a young woman in your life who's interested in pursuing science, and we plan on sharing this webinar all over and hope to inspire some young students. So can you tell us a little bit about what you studied in high school? You mentioned the Science Research Club, but any other kind of tips that you can give for especially middle or high school students who are looking to pursue STEM or science in their college and future careers?
Yeah, for sure. I think much of my interest in STEM came from, being in school. I think much of what I studied in high school was more STEM-based because I garnered more towards a fascination in the STEM field. I was specifically interested in environmental science because of my biology class. I find it really cool how environmental science isn't just regarded in like a scientific manner, but in a social manner as well. So since I saw how environmental science kind of connects more on a social level, I would kind of attend these, I would very much volunteer, and I would just make field trips to go to museums and aquariums. And I think from going to these, little field trips, it kind of really connected me to how science kind of elevates beyond the classroom. It very much applies into the real world. And I think volunteering very much helps. I think, again, mentioning the greenhouse, it really jump-started my interest in tech and engineering because it's just really cool to see how the disciplines that you're learning in the classroom can kind of be implemented even beyond to the real world.
Great. So there were some core classes and curriculum that you were able to sign up for in terms of enrolling in those classes, and then also encouraging volunteer opportunities and field trips.
Yes.
Great. Thank you. Becky, I wanted to ask you the next question. And you talked a little bit about this in your statement about what International Women's Day means to you, but what would you say, or what do you think is the most significant barrier we face today in terms of female leadership, especially when it comes to STEM and science?
That's definitely a great question, and also a very large question. I think there's a lot, unfortunately, of barriers that exist. But for me, I think one of the biggest barriers to success in terms of female leadership, particularly in STEM, is that I think that there needs to be a mindset shift of the fact that women do deserve to be in these positions of power and leadership positions just as much as men do. Unfortunately, because of structures that have been in place for a very long time, makes it much harder for women, particularly women of color, to receive credit that they deserve for the incredible work that they are doing. It's really harder for us women to be seen, and it's harder for us to be in positions of power. So I think it's a mindset shift, like I said, that women deserve to be in these places of power where they can be making these incredible discoveries. We've still done it. We've still done incredible discoveries over the course of history of women in science, but it's been that much harder for us to get there. So one way to overcome this barrier is to kind of increase sponsorship and mentorship to get women into senior level positions in science, whether that's the head of a research lab or head of the aquarium, or getting them up on a platform to speak about climate change. Things like that are really going to be important to get women to get them more visible, to allow younger generations to then see themselves as the role models and see, hey, I could be in that role one day. So I think it's really important that, you know, in order to see yourself in the future, you need to be able to envision it. In order to be able to envision it, it's really important that we have role models and people in those roles. It's really hard to kind of dream when you don't see yourself represented. So that's why I think, you know, from an adult perspective, it's really important to continue to highlight positive women's work that's going on. So that's not just from women, but from women and men in the working world, like a lot of these people that we have on this call right now, you know, acting as, raising up women that are acting as role models, that are doing incredible work, that are making these positive discoveries, so that young women and women that are excited about pursuing kind of careers have these role models or examples that they can then look up to. So that's kind of from the adult perspective. I think from the student perspective, it means on the other side of things, continuing to look for people that inspire you, looking for mentors and role models that excite you. And it doesn't have to end up that that person is going to be a job that person's in a job that you're going to be in the future. But it's really great to think about what inspires you, what excites you, why are these people, you know, important to you, or you look up to them. And then from there, young women can start to think about, like Eva touched upon this, organizations and clubs and things that they can get involved in, or even social media that involve these women that inspire them, so that they can envision themselves and then get involved in the future. From there, I think it's a cascading effect. But I think, you know, this barrier is a mindset shift. Women need to be put into positions of power, and they deserve to be there, but also it's about like highlighting female leadership and discoveries that are already happening. There are already amazing things that women are doing that are happening, but it's highlighting that, especially when you have the opportunity to do so. So it's a barrier of women not being seen or giving credit. It's not always intentional, but people need to really get out of their comfort zone and work hard to find opportunities to lift up women's voices in order to change this structural problem that's being going on. So for example, really quickly, is when I was a teacher, I did this kind of, it was almost like a social experiment at the beginning of the year, where I asked all of my students to draw what a scientist looks like. That was the prompt. What does a scientist look like? And at the beginning of the year, pretty much all of them drew Albert Einstein. They drew this old white man, big hair, in a lab coat. And throughout the year, by bringing in speakers, I did a thing called Speak with a Scientist, where I brought in speakers that looked like my students or had similar backgrounds to my students, by bringing them on field trips, et cetera. We did what does a scientist look like at the end of the year, and most of them ended up either drawing themselves or a role model that they'd met in science. So that was just a mini social experiment, but it shows that it really does make a difference. Being able to envision yourself in that future role of someone in science. So.
Yeah, it's all about exposure. And that's a really good point. And something, if I can add to that, is I think, you know, advocating for yourself as a woman is huge. And it's never too soon to ask for a mentor. Like, I think it's just also at any age, no matter how young or even old, I mean, even if you're older and already established in your career, it's still okay to ask for advice and ask for help and seek out a mentor. If there's somebody doing something that you really look up to, you know, definitely ask them to, you know, to give you input and kind of guide you in the right direction. So thank you for that, Becky. April, I was going to ask you a different question, unless you wanted to add anything to the one I just asked.
Okay.
So kind of similar along the same lines as what I just asked about female leadership, but if you could also talk about some of the maybe solutions to the issue of the barriers to female leadership, like how can women navigate those power structures that they're inevitably going to hit in their career, especially early in their careers?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is similar to what Becky was saying. You know, for myself personally, I just I like to focus on what I can control, right? Because there's gonna be assumptions made of me, but stereotypes just based off of the way I look. People can read into my character, So I think it's, I like to, like I said, I like to focus on the things I can control, and for me, that's my character every day, my attitude, my work ethic, showing up for myself, and it's like people in power above me can think or say whatever they want about me, but I know that I'm going to let my work speak for itself, and that nobody can take that away from me. They can't take away my accomplishments. They can't they can't change the things that are proven. So I like to, to focus on like I said, on the things that I can't control. And, in the same vein, finding allies in other women in your organization, and having mentors. And some of mine are on the call right now, making me nervous. So, it's important to have that camaraderie, or someone that, can be a sounding board and give you advice so you don't act rash. And it's really helpful, especially if they're, they've been in your position before, and they, can lend sound advice. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Eva, back to you. And you talked a little bit about this in the courses that you studied in high school, but wondering if you can expand a little bit about any activities or volunteer opportunities that you found particularly helpful. Maybe you can kind of dive into a couple of those, and especially any young women or girls who might be involved or go to schools where they don't have a New York Sun Works labs, or they don't have, they only have those core curriculum, basic science classes, and there's not really a lot of extracurriculars. Like, how are some ways that they can better prepare for college or better get involved in their greater community?
Yes. So my sophomore year, I actually did research with a lab, and it was very bittersweet because I think that was my first exposure to like the STEM field, where I experienced feelings of like inadequacy. So it was really tough to kind of navigate my experience in that research, but it's also really thrilling to see the type of opportunities that I happened to get. And I was able to explore a lot of the research that I am really interested in doing in my college career. I think I was actually really lucky to have been able to get that research position through my teacher. So I recommend, reaching out to your teachers, because they're such a valuable resource, and they're really knowledgeable in, certain resources that are, present in the communities. I'm really lucky that my chemistry teacher, Mrs. Chang, she really helped me find opportunities that kind of fit my interest. So I think really branching out to your teachers really helps, because otherwise I really wouldn't have be in the position that I am today.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So April and Becky, this question is for both of you. What particular advice would you give to the next generation of female leaders? And I want to include Eva on that as well, since she is a young future science and STEM leader, and she's just starting her college career. So I guess at any level of, middle school, high school, and beyond, what's the best piece of advice you would give?
So I think for me, the advice that I always like to give is to have confidence in yourself, at any level, starting out in college, at your job. The feeling of inadequacy it's normal. It's there because you're doing something new that you've never done before, so it's really understanding that, it's okay to be nervous and scared because you don't know, but I promise you, all the other men in the room feel the same way as well. It's not, it's not just, women that have those feelings. And, the other thing that I would say too is that you don't have to wait to be a leader. You are a leader right now, currently, whether it's to your older brothers and sisters, or, in your family. And, you're being a leader is more than just, being a boss at work. You can be a leader in your community. And the more that you put yourself out there and, work on those leadership skills and in all those areas of your life, it's going to be positive, and it's, going to help you with the leadership that you ultimately are looking for in your career.
I think that's awesome advice. Just to add on to that, I think it's never too early to begin to pursue something that you're passionate about. And to also not be embarrassed or ashamed of what you're passionate about. I mean, we need women in all aspects of science and STEM. So for example, if you love bugs, like go for it. I think, you know, when I was little, I loved marine biology, and I think it was like a little bit out of the norm, like how much I loved like fish and dolphins and sharks. But you know, it's something I was really passionate about. We need leaders that are women in all aspects of STEM. So it's never too early to start getting involved with something you're excited about. And I would say, to add on also to kind of what April was saying, if you are following what excites you and you want to be a leader in that realm, you're going to meet some amazing like-minded people along the way that are going to kind of push and change your thinking too. So I would seek out either organizations or clubs or social media, or just opportunities to connect with people that you share passions with. Because even though they might not be the same personality as you or come from the same background as you or anything like that, connecting with other women that are that have similar passions to you and might go into similar careers or something like that as you is really important, because we not only need individual leaders of women in STEM, but we also need cohorts of them that are then able to lift up one another, so that the cycle continues of having leaders in ideally all aspects of STEM.
So I'm seeing a lot of comments in the chat box just about women supporting each other in the workplace and women supporting each other and how necessary it is. So forgive me because I didn't originally send these questions to you all, but I think it's just a good discussion, a natural kind of topic that we're talking about tonight. So as women, what would you all say is the best way that we can support other women? And then also, how can men best support women in the workplace? Because I mean, I do want to acknowledge that even though it's Women's History Month and International Women's Day, we have several men who are here on the call today who are, just by being here, supporting us women and, you know, in honor of International Women's Day. So what kind of things can they do as well in the workplace to show their support?
Yeah, I think just being strong advocates for women, giving them a seat at the table, allowing them a chance to speak, hearing, giving them opportunities, understanding that we, as women, we bring different perspectives. We have different, issues than men, and I think allowing women to have a space it's important. And I think, men and women alike can do more to just help each other out in general.
Yeah, definitely.
Building off of that, I think it's really important, especially in meetings and settings where there are a lot of people present, to give room for women's voices to be heard and to actively elevate women's voices. So that's something that women can do for other women, but also men can do as well. We all, not all of us, but all women probably on this call have been in a situation where they've shared an idea, whether it's in a classroom or in a work setting, and then a guy has raised their hand and said basically what you just said with slightly different words. A lot of us have been there. So a way to stop that from happening, to elevate women's voices as original and valued to the conversation, is elevating the voices that are speaking, allow them space to be heard, and really just supporting other women when they're trying to do that as well. Because there's so many amazing ideas that women have, and so we need to give them the space to bring those up and elevate them and support them.
So yeah, Kyla just mentioned that at NYPA, there's an employee resource group called Women in Power, where women can share their stories and learn from each other. So that's a great point, Kyla. And a good suggestion as well is, if you don't have a group like that at your workplace, suggest that that's something that gets started. And now is the perfect month to do so. Like, take advantage of the opportunity of Women's History Month and International Women's Day and suggest that this is something that's implemented at your workplace. So that's great, Kyla. Anything that you wanted to add, Eva?
I think I really loved what April said about kind of advocating for us, because advocating for ourselves, self-advocation, can only just go so far. And I think just opening up the floor and allowing us to speak and, just simply listening to us can just go so far. So I really want to just emphasize that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to remind everybody, all the attendees, that we have about 15 minutes left. So if anybody has any questions for our panelists, feel free to use the Q&A button on the bottom of your screen, or if you can't find that, you can use the chat box. And if we don't see any come through, I'll just continue to ask some questions to our amazing panelists. So thank you all for bearing with us and for being here tonight. So on that note, while we wait for any questions that come through, I'm just going to continue to go through some of my extra questions, if you all don't mind. So I know we've talked about some of the struggles that women face and ways that we have to advocate for ourselves. So I would love if all three of you can share ways that you kind of stay grounded and take care of yourself while you are constantly trying to prove yourselves and advocate, and kind of, you know, you have to work really hard to get to where you are today. And April, I mean, specifically when you were sharing your story and kind of like all the struggles you went through to get to where you are today, like, so what's some advice that you can give to women to kind of make sure that they take care of their mental health as well?
Well, I'm a workaholic, so I don't know if I was that's my question, but I think for me, my family keeps me very grounded, and outside of being a workaholic, I'm also a travelholic. So I take the time. I think the saying is work hard, play hard. So I don't really see traveling as an option. It's something that I fit into my schedule, and it's something that I make happen. So for me, I think that's kind of gives me the break and the something to look forward to, something to, refresh and re-engage my mind. And I also do a lot of community work. It's more work, but I enjoy it. And for me, I never thought I was going to be an engineer when I was in high school. So that the motto, see the change you be the change you want to see, is really something that I really try to live by. And now that I'm into my engineering career, and I really take the time to to reach back and to talk to the colleges in the area and their engineering departments, their students, and really just be encouraging.
Yeah, I want to add on to that. I think my friends keep me super grounded. I think developing hobbies is really great. I love to, make jewelry and garden. So I really like to develop those hobbies because, and also kind of engaging in self-care is really important. So I think, hobbies and self-care, I really love engaging in that.
Becky, what do you do to stay grounded?
I think what they both touched upon is really important. I make a lot of time for my family and friends. I have a lot of hobbies that I like to do. I also think a huge part of being passionate about what you're doing is this aspect of giving back. It's something that's bigger than you. So something that I absolutely love about in terms of working with New York Sun Works is that, even if it can be a stressful week, there's a lot going on. I believe so much in the mission of the organization, bringing sustainability science to all of these schools and allowing for all these students to have opportunities to work with hydroponics that I never got when I was younger. So I think one of the things too that grounds me specifically in the work that we're doing is thinking about like why I got into it in the first place. How does it connect to my passions? And the fact that I'm so lucky and honestly privileged to be able to be in a position where I'm working for an organization that aligns with my passions. A lot of people have passions, but don't have the work aligning with that. And I'm really lucky that I have that. So I think going back to, why you got into the work in the first place. And if you're in a work situation where you aren't necessarily able to meld your passions with your work, then like April was saying, find opportunities outside of what you're doing to still be able to think bigger than you and think outside of you and be able to give back, because it really feels really good to be able to do that. I was just going to say one other thing that I think connected to what you were talking about earlier in terms of struggle that I wanted to share with for any students that we have on the call or that watch this later. I think especially for women in science, when you're in high school and college, those science classes can be really, really rigorous. Like they can be really scary. Especially if you're in college and you go to a big school, like I went to Cornell, some of these classes have 1,000 kids. You're in a room with like 1,000, well, not during COVID, but generally with 1,000 kids, it's a lot of test-based subjects. It's a lot of math. And so what I would say is to not get overwhelmed with that, but finding things that ground you there is super important. Finding study buddies, finding other women in the class that you can work with, because there's so many people that will tell you you can't do it, or barriers, specifically in terms of like the education you have to do to get into the STEM field. But it's so worth it if you're passionate about it, to make it work. So I would just say, don't let the scariness of the class keep you from pursuing a career in science or STEM, because it's so easy for people to write women off and say that they can't do those classes when they are totally capable of doing it. And so much of it is about confidence. My tutor used to say, take a test like a man. So you got to go into those classes with confidence, find other women in the class, band together and get it done, because Orgo might not matter in 10 years, but doing something in science that you're passionate about will matter, and you'll really enjoy it.
That's so true, especially about passion. And, you know, we're also privileged that we have passions. Like some people, they have a lot of things that they might be interested in or that they focus on, but they don't necessarily have something that really like drives them and they're like superly inherently passionate about that. So I also feel like I'm privileged that I have something that I'm passionate about in sustainability. So that being said, we do have a couple of questions. Leah and Mabel Scott asked, when you were younger, did you originally want to be what you are today? And I can just briefly say for myself, I absolutely am not what I originally thought I wanted to be, and in the best way possible. And I think that's quite common, but if you all wanted to share that, I'd love to hear your stories.
I can go first. So when I was really little, I wanted to be a writer and a veterinarian. And then as it evolved, I wanted to be working specifically with ocean animals and working with the ocean. And then it evolved to kind of more sustainability science generally. So I guess it kind of evolved in that way. So I always had, in terms of writer and vet, I always had like science and education or writing sort of. So it kind of came together in that way. But I think that's something to think about for young women that are thinking about what they want to pursue. You're not probably going to know what you're going to end up being. You might not know how your interests will change over time. So I think just as you continue to evolve as a person and what you're interested in and passionate about, continue to pursue that, because the road to get to where you are in your career is going to be windy, it's going to change, and that's totally fine. No one starts out knowing exactly what they want to be. And specifically for my role that I'm in right now, I didn't even know this type of role existed. So that's something to think about too. You might not know that that role that you want even exists in the first place.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's so true. And what you want to do can evolve over time. What you wanted to do as a young teenager might not be what you want to do as a 25 or 35-year-old or 45-year-old. I mean, you can constantly evolve and change your career as you see fit and develop these different passions. It's so true. So we have a few minutes left, and Kimberly asked a great question. She said, how can women be more assertive in pursuing leadership roles or entry-level jobs in STEM? In my own field, I find women often don't think they are qualified for positions unless they can check off every box in the job description. It's a great question.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because, you know, we all, you know, have that self-doubt, but, you know, I think having confidence in yourself and your abilities and, you know, you know, I don't want to talk about the male species in a negative way, but it's just like, sometimes I think to myself, I'm like, you know, are the men having these doubts about applying for jobs? It seems like, you know, I know some men that aren't qualified and they just figure it out when they get there, you know, they're just holding on by the seat of their pants. And it's like, you know, I think women are overthinkers, overanalyzers, and, you know, we get stuck and caught in that, you know, and don't move forward. And, you know, that's why I think having confidence in yourself and believing in your abilities, it's, you know, it's really important. And being able to advocate for yourself and quantify the things that you have accomplished and write them down and look at it and help yourself, you know, get that confidence to take the next job or the next step, and, you know, talk to other people who, you know, have the position, have had the position, so you can have a better understanding. And it's not just some, you know, some words you're trying to match your skills to and check some boxes, but that you have a real understanding of the position, and you know, if you're capable. And you know, I think as far as school and entering STEM, like you're not going to know. It's your history and your past drive and your love of science and your passion that's going to push you through schooling. You know, but you know, like Becky said, it's very, the classes are hard, they're overwhelming, and like my mom loves to tell me, if it was easy, everyone would do it. So you know, you really have to have the work ethic and the drive, and you know, want it for yourself.
Yeah, and that's great advice, April. I think a lot of people, both men and women, I mean, I'm speculating men too, but you're right, probably not as analytical as us women, but we think that we have to have every qualification in a job description, and it's definitely not the case. I mean, it's also just knowing what your strengths are and being able to highlight those and being able to advocate for those strengths. You know, there are certain things you can teach and learn and other things that you can't, in my opinion. And, you know, passion is probably the number one thing that you can't teach somebody. So if you have a passion about that role, I would say go for it. I mean, the worst that can happen is you get a no, and then, you know, you keep going. Becky and Eva, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I was just going to add on to that. I think that there's so many different things that put women in boxes, whether it's society or structures that have been in place in a long time, that have been in place for a long time. Structures put us in these boxes, and I think we need to not also put ourselves in those boxes and think that we are so small that we only are worth like these bullet points that they have on a list for a job description. I think it's like April said, you know, having that confidence in yourself, but also thinking in more of a meta sense of what you bring to the table, whether it's soft skills or hard skills. There's so many things that you bring to the table that are really important and could be extremely valuable to a position. So for example, when I was transitioning out of teaching, but I really still wanted to be involved in science education, I had to think really creatively about what skills I brought to the table, what experiences I had that could be applicable in these new roles, and something that I was really passionate about. So I think we have, you know, so many opportunities to break out of these boxes and not minimize ourselves to these bullet points. And so I think it's really important to think that way and not continue to put ourselves in boxes when other people are already unfortunately doing that historically.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
I just wanted to say something to what Becky said. As a woman in engineering, I can definitely say 100% that my social skills have pushed me ahead of the men tenfold. You know, I can tell that a lot of the jobs that I've gotten and positions and you know, in clubs and school, it was because, you know, the men that tend to be good at math and science are, you know, a little bit more socially inept, and that's where I could really shine and you know, show my skill set. And transitioning from project engineering after I got my MBA to key account management, which is more sales, you know, it was definitely my strength and my soft skills that got me that opportunity. So, you know, I definitely think that it's something that, you know, everyone, but especially women, can use as a strength.
Yeah, absolutely. Eva, anything you wanted to add to this?
I think I just want to say thank you, because all this advice is very helpful for me, since I'm very much starting out in my STEM career. And I think I'm really happy to be a panelist, but also be a participant and listen on to this advice, because this is like such amazing advice.
Oh, well, that's so great. Thank you, Eva. And I think that is a perfect way to end things tonight. So we have a minute left until 7. And I just want to give a huge thank you to all 3 of you and to NYPA for co-hosting this event with us. But thank you all so much for joining tonight, attendees. Thank you to our panelists, Becky, Eva, and April. You're all incredibly inspiring. I feel so motivated and so, you know, grateful to be a woman after hearing this. And we really appreciate your time and for you to uplift other women around us. So thank you all for being here, and we appreciate it. Happy International Women's Day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thanks for coming.